This series of videos is looking at ways that we can improve our writing, and this video focuses on sentence structure. The structure of our sentences is paramount to how clearly and effectively we communicate. Sentences are the vehicle by which we communicate information, so how we arrange and present that information makes a huge difference on the effectiveness of our writing. In all of these videos, we've been looking at things that detract from or enhance the quality of our writing. And in this criteria, we'll unpack 4 detractors: D9, D10, D11, and D12. D9 refers to the use of primarily simple sentences. In the early stages of writing, we see people using very short, simple sentences to convey simple ideas. But as we develop our writing, our sentences need to become more complex. A key question to underpin this is, how much information am I including in each sentence? Are there opportunities in my writing to combine sentences by creating noun groups? And am I showing accurate connection between information through my use of conjunctions? In the first example, we can see a series of short, simple sentences. Basketball is a great game. Players are arranged in teams. The goal is to get the ball through the hoop at the end of the court. When we present short, simple sentences, we don't show a lot of connection between the information. So creating more complex sentences not only allows us to show greater connection, but also allows us to be more concise in our wording. The second example reads, "The Batman was released in 2022. It was one of the most popular films of the year." This is a great example of where 2 simple sentences could easily be combined to create a more complex sentence using a noun group. The third example reads, "The aim of the game is to eliminate the opposing team as quickly as possible. Once the opposing team have been defeated, the remaining players receive experience based on how much time is left." In this third example, we're going to look at how we can use a binding conjunction to create a stronger relationship between these 2 pieces of information. In the first example, you can see how we've removed a lot of those simple sentences and combined them into one sentence. Basketball involves teams of players aiming to throw a ball through a hoop at the end of the court. Rather than dedicating one sentence to each piece of information, we've taken those pieces of information and incorporated them into the greater sentence, so we're able to communicate with greater density and be more concise. The second example reads, "The 2022 film The Batman was one of the most popular releases of the year." This relates to our work with noun groups. Rather than dedicating a sentence to the fact that Batman was released in 2022, by moving that information into the noun group, we were able to turn 2 simple sentences into one sentence that conveys 2 pieces of information. This improves the density of our writing and also allows us to be more concise. The final piece reads, "Because players receive experience based on the remaining time, the goal is to eliminate the opposing team as soon as possible." By taking these 2 simple sentences and combining them into a complex sentence by using the word because, we've made a relationship between the information, and we now have a better understanding as to what motivates people to play the game. D10 refers to the use of incomplete or run-on sentences. We need to consider whether we are controlling where information in our writing begins and ends, whether we're using punctuation clearly and accurately, and whether sentences are complete. The purpose of sentences is to convey information. However, when our sentences aren't clearly defined, it's difficult to know where our information begins and ends. In this example, we read, "The hero sacrifices their life, but it means that the world gets to live on. This allows the settlers of the planet to create a new society, which is really good because it means they can build houses and raise livestock and start farming without worrying that they're going to get attacked." This is an example of a run-on sentence. There's numerous pieces of information here, and we needed a break to process those pieces of information before we moved on. All of the information in this case is related. However, there was some information that we could establish and then build on top of, and breaking those ideas up would have really helped us understand the writing. Our second example is on the opposite end. "Because you're on the edge of your seat." This is an incomplete sentence because we don't understand what this actually means. Sentences generally need to be self-contained, which means that when you read them, you understand the context of what they're talking about. The use of because in this case is unclear to us. We ask ourselves, because of what? And we don't have that information available to us. so this sentence is not complete and therefore not accurate. The final example reads, Morgan, the most difficult character in the game to defeat. This is also an incomplete sentence, and what we can see in this case is that it's actually a noun group. A noun group is not a sentence, so all of the information that's been given to us in this case relates to the noun. Morgan is the noun or thing, and the most difficult character in the game to defeat is the qualifier of that noun group. We don't understand what it is that Morgan, in this case, is actually doing. And with no action, we have no complete sentences. So it's really important for us to make sure we've got a clear balance of what needs to be in a sentence and where to begin and end our information. When we look at our first updated piece of evidence, we read, the hero sacrifices their life, but it means the world gets to live on. Full stop. This is our first piece of information, and it establishes the origin of what's going to happen afterwards. Following the sacrifice, the settlers on the planet create a new society. We notice that there's been some changes to the wording here to make sure that these sentences clearly connect. So the addition of following the sacrifice as a connective in this case means that we understand that the information in the previous sentence is still relevant to what we've gone on to say. The final sentence reads, they are able to build houses, raise livestock, and farm the land without fear of attack. Again, we start this sentence with the word they, which in this case refers to the settlers who are the subject of the previous sentence. But what we've been sure to do in this case is convey three separate pieces of information in a clear sequence that builds our understanding the more we read. The second improved example reads, because you are on the edge of your seat, you slowly become more prepared for these moments as they continue to occur. This is a complete sentence because it features the original part of the sentence, which include the connective because, but it also gives us additional information that makes that first part of the sentence make sense. This is called the relationship between a dependent and an independent clause. It all sounds pretty technical, but it just goes to show that you need to make sure that you finish a sentence, and you can't have a sentence purely based on the word because, if, or so. Our final improved example reads, Morgan, the most difficult character in the game to defeat, reveals himself at multiple points during the story. Similar to above, we can see that the original version was not complete. We needed to explain what action Morgan was actually performing in order to complete the sentence. So by adding that information on now, we've got a complete sentence that makes clear sense. One of the most common forms of feedback you'll receive in your writing is D11. And this is a bit of an everything detractor, in the sense it picks up such a wide variety of things, I won't be able to talk about all the different iterations within this single video. What you need to think about in this case, however, is about your grammar, punctuation, and spelling. How accurate is your grammar and punctuation? How accurate is your spelling? And do the errors in your writing impact how clear or effective that writing is to a reader? Our examples in this case show us some of the common errors that we see in student writing. The word the has a typo error in the middle of the word. The word hero is misspelled. The word there is also incorrect. Even though there is spelled correctly, it's the wrong use of there and should be spelled Their. Punctuation is also missing from this sentence. It should read, the hero has their own agenda, because there's a pause between that piece of information and the next piece of information. It goes on to say, they wait for the right moment to strike. The word right is misspelt, and the word wait has a capital letter for no particular reason. So all of these areas would have been picked up as D11s within this sentence. The second example shows some slightly different errors that are still common in student writing. In this case, the sentence should start with a capital letter. We read, the city is based on Chicago. Because Chicago is a real, specific place, it's what we call a proper noun, so it should have a capital letter in this case. The main means of trade is a unique currency called oblocks. When we're using unique language, there's a couple of things that we can do. The most common is that we use apostrophes on either side of the word to dictate the fact that this is not a regular word. In some cases, a word like oblocks might be a proper noun, but it can depend on its use and role in the world that it has function. The third example in this case shows just some of the omissions that can happen sometimes when we write. They set off on a adventure that lead them for majority of the film. So while there's no spelling errors here, there are some keywords that have either been misused or misplaced. Instead of saying they set off, they've forgotten the second F and they've written they set of. Instead of saying an adventure, they've written a adventure, which doesn't sound right. When we read that lead them, we get a sense that there should be an S in there, reading that leads them. And when we talk about words like majority, we often say the majority. Our updated versions are relatively clear-cut in this case. For the first one we read, the hero has their own agenda, full stop. They wait for the right moment to strike, full stop. These are two simple sentences, but they're also two separate pieces of information, and while they could be combined into a single sentence, in this case, the punctuation is still accurate. The second updated example reads, the city is based on Chicago, and the main means of trade is a unique currency called oblocks. In this case, I've chosen not to use the capital for the word oblocks, suggesting that it's not a proper noun, but to show that it is an uncommon or made-up word in this case, I have used apostrophes. The final improved example reads, they set off on an adventure that leads them through the majority of the film. And the changes I've made in this case largely speak for themselves. D11 feedback is extremely common through most pieces of student writing. The benefit of a D11 is it doesn't always take a very long time to fix. However, it can be tricky when you find one because you might not necessarily recognise what the error is that's being pointed out to you. So use this guide to help you come up with some ideas. The final detractor when it comes to sentence structure is the use of inconsistent punctuation. What we need to think about here is whether we're using punctuation consistently. It might be that in some cases we use punctuation correctly, while in other cases we use it incorrectly or in a different context. One of the most important aspects to good writing is consistency. You'd be amazed at what you can get away with as long as the rules that you adhere to are consistent across your writing. This prompts the question, are there elements in my writing that are out of place or inconsistent with the rest of my writing? Some of the common D12 errors are illustrated in these examples. The first one reads, the hobbits initially make their way to Mordor. However, once they reach Mordor, they realise it's heavily guarded. The inconsistency in this case is the use of a capital letter for Mordor, suggesting it's a proper noun, but then in the next sentence, not using a capital letter. If you're going to suggest that something is a proper noun, then you need to be consistent in your delivery of that noun for the rest of your writing. The second example reads, there are three characters, Adam, played by Harry Styles, Michelle, and Agatha, who is played by Keira Knightley. The key difference we see here is the use of brackets. Brackets can be a bit of an interesting thing in writing, and generally the golden rule is to avoid them at all costs. What we should certainly avoid, however, is using them as a one-off. In this example, we were able to depict that Adam was played by Harry Styles without using brackets, so it seems strange and inconsistent that when we get to Agatha within the same sentence, we're conveying similar information but this time using brackets. The last example reads, each game features 3 periods which last for 20 minutes each. A general rule of thumb for writing is that we use the word forms of numbers instead of the number form, but in this case there's an inconsistency in choice. Each game features 3 periods where the word 3 is used, but then later on it says 20 minutes and the number is used. As mentioned, the preference is always that you use the word over the number, but if you're going to use the number, make sure you use numbers consistently. In our improved version of these examples, we read, the hobbits initially make their way to Mordor, however once they reach Mordor, they realise it's heavily guarded. I haven't changed any punctuation in this case, but I have made sure that that capital letter is consistent across all sentences. There are 3 characters, Adam, played by Harry Styles, Michelle, and Agatha, who is played by Keira Knightley. In this case, I've made sure that I'm using consistent formatting and punctuation to show that additional information with the actors. I could have used brackets for Harry Styles, and that would have also resolved the issue, but as mentioned, as a golden rule of thumb, try and avoid brackets where you can. Generally, if you can't say it within the writing, it's not worth saying. In the last example, you can see I've made the simple change of moving from 20 minutes, written in numeric form, to the word 20 instead, to keep that consistency of writing going across my piece. Hopefully this video has given you some good pointers in how to improve the sentence structure of your writing. Be sure to check out the other videos for further tips on how you can improve your written work.